My daughter called me petty for not wanting her mom's lover at her wedding. She said, "I like him. He is a friend and harmless." When I insisted, she said, "I guess you give me no other option than to cancel your invitation." I didn't say anything else. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Jamie Taylor from New York. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. I was in the middle of changing a light fixture in the hallway when the mail dropped through the slot with a soft clatter. The envelope was cream-colored and heavy, the kind of paper that tried to make up for the emptiness of what's inside. I wasn't expecting anything special that day, bills, flyers, maybe a coupon or two, but I knew her handwriting the moment I saw it. My daughter, Claire. She always had a soft, rounded script, the kind she used to write me Father's Day notes with when she was little, back before the world split in two. I held the envelope in my hand longer than necessary. I turned it over a few times, just staring at my name, Dad, written out in her handwriting, like a time capsule from when we still knew how to talk to each other. I opened it slowly, carefully, like it might explode if I wasn't gentle. Inside was a wedding invitation, white cardstock, floral trim, gold lettering. She was getting married. I already knew that part from a phone call months ago, a brief update shared with the enthusiasm of someone checking off a to-do list. "We finally set a date," she had said. "I'll send you the details." But I didn't expect the chill I felt reading it now. My name wasn't anywhere on the inner envelope. No father of the bride. No with love. Just an RSVP card with boxes to check. What stopped me cold, though, wasn't the lack of warmth. It was the last line of the invite. "Reception to follow, hosted by Linda and Kevin." Kevin, her mother's lover. The man who sat across from me at my own dining table years ago and lied straight through his teeth. I stood there for a long while, staring at that name like it was a curse carved into stone. I hadn't heard it spoken in years, not in my presence anyway. Kevin was the man my wife had left me for, the man she claimed was just a friend from work, until she stopped coming home on Thursdays and started picking fights over nothing. When the truth came out, it wasn't explosive. It was silent. A quiet betrayal that seeped into every part of my life. She didn't even apologize, just said, "These things happen," and packed her bags. Kevin never said a word to me. Not then, not ever. And now, here he was, hosting my daughter's wedding reception like the patriarch of the family. I called Claire that night. My hands were trembling a little, though I told myself it was from the cold. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, Dad," she said, casually, as if nothing had changed. I kept my voice steady. "Claire, I got the invitation. Congratulations." A pause. "Thanks," she said. I didn't waste time. I noticed Kevin's name on the reception card. Silence. I waited. "Yeah," she said finally. "He and Mom are helping with the venue. They've done a lot of the planning, actually." Her tone was even, nonchalant, like we were talking about flower arrangements. "Claire," I said, choosing my words like I was defusing a bomb. "I can't be there if he's going to be there." The pause was longer this time. "What do you mean?" she asked, but it wasn't confusion, it was annoyance. I could hear it sliding into her voice like a knife. "You know what I mean. I can't sit in the same room as him, pretend everything's fine. He's not just a stranger, he's the reason your mother and I couldn't even finish the sentence. She cut me off. "Dad, that was a long time ago. You really can't let it go." Her voice was sharper now, defensive. "He's harmless. He's actually been really good to me and Mom." That's when I felt something inside me crack, something small, but irreversible. The way she said it, like I was being unreasonable, petty even. Like I should have just buried everything and smiled through the pain because it made her life easier. "I'm not asking for much," I said. "I just want to be there for you. But not with him." Another pause. "Well," she said quietly, "I guess you give me no other option than to cancel your invitation." It didn't even sound like her. Or maybe it did, and I just hadn't heard her clearly until now. I didn't say anything after that. Not a word. I just hung up the phone, set it down gently on the kitchen counter, and walked outside. The night air slapped me in the face. I sat on the porch for a long time, trying to wrap my head around what had just happened. My own daughter had chosen him. Not over me, exactly, but instead of me. She'd made peace with her mother's betrayal, with his presence, and expected me to do the same. As if my pain had an expiration date she got to set. I didn't go to the wedding. I didn't call. I didn't send a gift. I didn't look at the photos when mutual friends posted them online. That was the day I walked out of her life, and I never looked back. The first week after the call felt like being dropped into a silent movie where everyone else kept talking. I went to work, paid my bills, cooked my dinners, but everything felt muted. Numb. People at work talked about football games and their kids, and I nodded along, but my mind was always stuck on that last phone call. He's harmless. That line looped in my head like a bad commercial jingle. I kept hearing it in her voice, so casual, so dismissive, as if Kevin were some bumbling uncle, not the man who once helped dismantle my family behind my back. I kept picturing Claire at the wedding, laughing next to him, thanking him for his help with the seating chart, or whatever. And then I'd see myself there, awkward, smiling through gritted teeth, drinking watered-down whiskey while pretending I wasn't watching the man who replaced me walk her down the aisle. I wanted to believe it was just a bad dream, that Claire would call back in a few days and say she'd been emotional, that she'd thought it over and realized how wrong it was to force me into that kind of situation. But the days rolled by, and my phone stayed quiet. I didn't call either. There was nothing left to say. If she thought I was being petty, if she truly believed that my discomfort was somehow less valid than her need to keep the peace with her mother's new man, then she didn't really see me at all. That realization hit me harder than anything. Not the wedding. Not Kevin. Not even my ex-wife's betrayal. No, the real gut punch was knowing my daughter had grown into someone who could look at the wreckage of our family and say, he's harmless. A few nights later, I got a call from my sister, Denise. She'd gotten her invitation too. You going? She asked. I told her no, gave her the short version. Her voice dropped. Wait, Kevin's gonna be there. I said yes. And Claire knows what he did. I said yes again. There was a long pause. Then she said, you're doing the right thing. That helped more than I expected. Just hearing someone, anyone, validate that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't overreacting, gave me something to hold on to. Denise had seen what that affair did to me. She remembered the nights I crashed on her couch with bloodshot eyes and a duffel bag, too broken to sleep in the house my wife had emptied out emotionally months before she moved her things. She saw the man I became, quiet, wary, tired, and she knew that wounds like that didn't vanish just because the calendar flipped a few years forward. But not everyone saw it that way. A week after the call with Denise, I got a text from my cousin Mark. Heard you're not coming to Claire's big day. You should be the bigger person, man. Don't ruin it over old beef. I stared at the message, unsure whether to laugh or throw the phone across the room. Old beef. Like it was a middle school squabble, not the implosion of a 20-year marriage. I didn't reply. I deleted the message, then deleted his number. I didn't need anyone in my life who thought forgiveness meant pretending things never happened. I'd forgiven a lot in my life, more than most people knew. But forgiveness didn't mean submission. It didn't mean swallowing pain so other people could feel more comfortable. Claire had made her choice, and I wasn't going to beg for a seat at a table where I clearly wasn't welcome. The worst part, though, was the way the silence stretched. As the wedding approached, I expected maybe a text. Something short. A peace offering. But nothing came. The day came and went without a single word from her. No call. No photo. No wish you were here. She didn't even ask if I was okay. That, more than anything, confirmed what I needed to know. She had moved on. Not just from the idea of a nuclear family, but from me. The father who raised her took her to every swim meet, helped her move into her first college dorm, taught her how to change a tire in the rain. He'd been traded in for someone harmless. And that's when the rage hit me. Not the loud, destructive kind. No, it was quieter, colder. The kind that settled deep in your chest like wet cement and didn't let you breathe right. For weeks, I tried to carry on like nothing happened. I kept to my routines, kept my voice calm when people asked about the wedding, and I said, didn't go. Some nodded with sympathy. Others asked why. I just said, family stuff. I didn't owe anyone an explanation, but I did owe myself something. I owed myself the dignity of honoring my own pain. The world was full of people pretending to be okay just to keep the peace. I wasn't going to be one of them. Claire had drawn a line in the sand, and for once, I didn't chase after her. I let her go. I let the wedding happen without me. I let Kevin make his toast and smile in the family photos. And I let myself grieve, not just the daughter I once had, but the illusion that she'd always be on my side. The truth is, sometimes the people you love most are the ones who wound you the deepest. Not because they hate you, but because they don't understand you. And in not understanding, they dismiss. They minimize. They make you feel like your pain is something you should just get over for the sake of civility. But pain doesn't work that way. Not real pain. It doesn't vanish because someone else decides it's inconvenient. It sits inside you until it's acknowledged. And if it never is, it festers. I wasn't going to let that happen. Not anymore. I had given too much of myself for too long. Now, it was time to start keeping something for me. The morning of the wedding, I woke up before the sun. No alarm, no real reason, just my body refusing to rest like it sensed something heavy waiting on the other side of the day. I lay there in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what she was doing at that exact moment. Was Claire sipping coffee in a silk robe surrounded by bridesmaids? Was she laughing nervously while a makeup artist dabbed foundation on her cheeks? Had she even thought of me that morning, wondered what I'd be wearing if I were there, or imagined what kind of speech I might have given? I didn't expect answers, but the questions buzzed in my head like flies I couldn't swat away. I sat up, pulled on a sweatshirt, and made coffee that tasted like nothing. I kept glancing at the clock, trying to guess what part of the ceremony they were at. Vows? Pictures? Toasts? It felt like a wake for someone who was still alive. I didn't leave the house that day. I thought about going fishing, thought about driving somewhere unfamiliar, but in the end, I just sat on my back porch in the shade and listened to the wind rustle through the trees. It was a quiet protest, in a way, a refusal to pretend I was fine. I didn't want to be distracted. I wanted to feel it. I needed to, even if it burned. Every part of me felt absent, like I'd been deleted from a chapter one helped write. I thought about the empty chair that should have been mine at the wedding, the seat saved for the father of the bride, the man who taught her how to ride a bike, who stayed up all night building a dollhouse one Christmas Eve. That chair was filled by someone else now. Kevin. And Claire had made peace with that, or maybe she never thought it mattered in the first place. Either way, the message was clear. I wasn't needed. Later that evening, around dusk, I got a call from Jim, an old friend from work who'd retired a few years before me. He was one of the few who stuck around after the divorce, the kind of guy who didn't need you to say much to understand what was going on. Heard today was the big day, he said, his voice careful. I didn't reply right away. Yeah, I finally said. She went through with it. Jim didn't jump to comfort me. He let the silence sit for a while. Then he said, "You sure you did the right thing not going?" That caught me off guard. He was the last person I expected to question me. You think I should have just smiled through it? I asked, more edge in my voice than I intended. Jim sighed. I think sometimes we show up for people even when it hurts. Especially for our kids. That stung. Not because he was wrong, but because part of me had asked that same question 100 times. But then I thought about what showing up would have actually looked like. Me, standing in a crowd of people pretending nothing happened. Watching Kevin hand her the mic for her speech. Smiling in family photos while swallowing every ounce of dignity I had left. Was that what being the bigger person meant? Sacrificing yourself on the altar of someone else's comfort? Showing up is easy when you're not the one being erased, I told him. You don't ask the wounded man to clap for the one who shot him. Jim went quiet for a long time, then said, "Fair enough," and didn't bring it up again. I appreciated that. He didn't agree, but he didn't push. Sometimes that's the best someone can do for you. Give you space without needing to fix anything. A few days later, Denise dropped by unannounced with a foil-covered plate of lasagna and a folder of wedding pictures someone had emailed her. She didn't ask if I wanted to see them. She just sat at my kitchen table and slid the folder across the surface like it was evidence in a trial. "You should see what you missed," she said, not cruelly, just plainly. I opened the folder, half out of curiosity, half out of some masochistic need to confirm I'd made the right call. Claire looked beautiful, radiant even. Her dress was simple, elegant. Her smile was the same one she wore in her high school graduation photos. But what made my stomach tighten was the photo of Kevin standing beside her, one hand lightly resting on her shoulder. His tie matched the bridal party colors. He wasn't just there. He was part of it, integrated, accepted, and I was nowhere. Denise leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "You should have been there," she said, her voice softer now. "Even just to remind her that you're still her dad." I didn't look up. "She knows who I am," I said. "She just decided it didn't matter." Denise gave me a long, searching look. Maybe. Or maybe she's just young and doesn't get it yet. Maybe someday she'll look back and realize what she lost. I shrugged. Or maybe she won't. We didn't speak for a while after that. Just sat there, the quiet settling in like fog. She didn't push again. She just reheated the lasagna and made 2 plates. We ate in silence, and I was grateful for it. That night, I went through my drawer and found an old letter Claire had written me for my birthday when she was 13. It was folded neatly, written in that same rounded script I'd recognized on the wedding envelope. "You're the best dad in the world. I don't know what I'd do without you." I read it twice, then tucked it back in the drawer. People change. Love fades. Loyalties shift. But I hadn't changed. I hadn't forgotten what it meant to be a father. I just stopped begging to be treated like one. That distinction mattered. Maybe not to everyone, but it mattered to me. It had been just over 2 years since I heard her voice. Long enough for the silence to harden into habit, for the pain to dull into something more bearable, like an old injury you forget about until it rains. I didn't think about her every day anymore. Only some days. Birthdays. Holidays. Days when I'd see a father and daughter laughing in the grocery store, and something in my chest would twist without warning. But I'd stopped expecting anything. That was the real difference. The hurt didn't go away, but the hope did. And with that gone, I finally started to feel free. Not joyful, not healed, just at peace with the absence. Some holes don't close. You just learn to walk around them. I was doing laundry when the call came. My phone buzzed on top of the dryer, her name lighting up the screen like a ghost I wasn't ready to confront. I stared at it for a long second, thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to let it go to voicemail, to stay in the silence we'd both chosen. But another part, the one that still remembered her as a 5-year-old singing off-key in the back seat, couldn't ignore it. I picked up. "Hello," I said, voice flat. There was a beat of silence. Then, "Hi, Dad." Her voice was thin, trembling. Immediately, I knew something was wrong. Not just emotional wrong. Real wrong. "What's going on?" I asked, more stern than concerned. Another pause. Then the flood came. "I messed up," she said, the words tumbling out like she'd been holding them in for days. I left Scott. I'm in a mess. I'm behind on rent, and my car's about to get repossessed. I don't know who else to call." I said nothing. My chest tightened, not out of anger, yet, but from the sheer strangeness of hearing her again, hearing that mix of panic and desperation. She kept going. "I know I don't deserve your help, okay? I know what I did. But please, I just need something to get back on my feet." I still didn't speak. I just let the silence settle. She'd filled the air so easily with excuses and explanations before. Now she had to feel what it was like to wait for someone else's mercy. Finally, I said, "Did you call Kevin first?" Her breath caught. "What?" I repeated it slowly. "You said he was harmless. Said he was good to you and Mom. Did you call him?" There was a beat of silence, then a soft, barely audible, "No." I leaned against the dryer, heart pounding but voice calm. "Well, maybe it's time you do. He was good enough to stand next to you on your wedding day. He was good enough to replace me. So go to him. Ask your mother's boyfriend for help." Her voice cracked. "Dad, please." I didn't know what I was doing back then. I didn't want to cause drama. That word again. Drama. That word people throw around when they don't want to deal with consequences. I swallowed hard. "You didn't want to cause drama, so you erased me. That was your choice, Claire." "This is mine." She started crying then. Not loud sobs, just these quiet, stifled whimpers like she was trying to hold the flood back. And for a second, just a second, I almost gave in. I almost said yes. Because I remembered the little girl who clung to my hand in parking lots, who used to write me notes with hearts in the margins. But then I remembered the silence, the wedding, the photos, the empty chair. I remembered how easily she discarded me, how she told everyone else I was being difficult, how she let a man who helped destroy our family play the role I'd spent her whole life preparing for. And I knew that if I bailed her out now, it would teach her nothing. It would only confirm what she'd always believed, that I would take the hit, carry the weight, just to keep her afloat. I'm sorry you're struggling, I said, my voice like steel. But I'm not the man you call when things fall apart. You decided that. There was a pause, then a whisper. You're really not going to help me? I took a deep breath, not out of anger, but out of restraint. No, Claire, not this time. She didn't say anything else. Just hung up. No goodbye, no curse. Just the sound of a call ending. I stood there in the silence, phone still in my hand, heart pounding like I'd just run a marathon. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired. Tired and hollow and strangely proud that I didn't fold. Later that night, I told Denise about the call. She listened without interrupting, her eyes hard. Good, she said when I finished. You finally stopped being her doormat. That word stung a little, but she wasn't wrong. For years, I'd given Claire every benefit of the doubt. I let her rewrite history, minimize the betrayal, paint me as the problem. I let her believe that I was the one making everything hard. But I wasn't hard. I was just honest. And no one in that family ever wanted honesty. They wanted quiet compliance dressed up as love. Not anymore. I wouldn't play that part again. Claire needed to grow through this on her own. Maybe she would. Maybe she wouldn't. But I was done being her safety net. The next day, I saw a missed call from a number I didn't recognize and a voicemail. It was Claire again. Her voice was calmer now, but cold. I get it. You've made your point. Just know you'll never hear from me again. I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the phone like it had turned into a weapon. She thought this was a punishment, that her silence would hurt me more than anything. And maybe 2 years ago it would have. But not now. Now, it felt like confirmation that I'd done the right thing. I saved myself. For once, I'd chosen me. The first sign that the silence wouldn't last came 3 days later in the form of a Facebook comment. I'd posted a photo of my dog, Max, chasing a squirrel in the backyard. It was something light, forgettable, just a quiet piece of a quiet life. But underneath the post was a comment from my cousin Angela. Glad to see you're doing so well while your daughter's life is falling apart. I stared at it for a long minute, that familiar tightness building in my chest. The internet had a way of amplifying things that should have stayed private, like yelling personal business into a megaphone at a funeral. I deleted the comment, blocked her, and leaned back in my chair with a slow, tired exhale. I knew that wouldn't be the end of it. When a man sets boundaries, people call him cold. When a father sets boundaries, people call him heartless. By the end of the week, I'd received 3 voicemails and 2 texts from extended family, none of whom had bothered to check on me in years, now acting like they were on some moral mission to correct my cruelty. One message from my Aunt Maureen nearly made me laugh, if it hadn't been so enraging. She's still your blood, she said. Don't let pride keep you from being a father. Pride. That word rang in my ears like an insult, as if my entire stance had been about ego and not about finally refusing to be used. Not a single person who called me had ever asked what it was like to be publicly erased at your own child's wedding. They didn't know the way Claire had looked through me, like I was a broken vase, sentimental, maybe, but no longer useful. No, all they saw now was a man who'd said no when a woman cried. And for some reason, that's always the bigger offense. I started keeping my phone on silent. It was easier that way, letting the calls pile up like leaves in the yard. Obnoxious, but easy enough to ignore if you didn't look directly at them. I didn't need the noise. I didn't need the guilt trips disguised as concern. What I needed was space. I needed quiet to sort through the wreckage in my mind, to remind myself, again and again, that saying no wasn't a betrayal. It was an act of self-preservation. I'd spent too long tying my worth to what I could do for others. First my wife, then my daughter. And for what? So they could call me inconvenient the second I stopped being agreeable? No. I wasn't going back to that life. I wouldn't set myself on fire to keep someone else warm again. That Sunday, I was out front washing my truck when my neighbor, Gerald, walked over. Gerald was one of those older guys who didn't say much, but when he did speak, it usually meant something. He stood there for a second, watching me rinse off the dust, then said, "Heard about Claire." I stiffened. "From who?" He shrugged. "People talk. My niece is friends with someone who knows your ex's circle." I sighed, bracing for judgment. But Gerald didn't scold me. He just leaned on the fence, arms crossed. "You did what you had to do," he said. "Sometimes being a father means letting your kids figure out how to stand without leaning on you. Hardest thing in the world. But sometimes the right thing is the hardest damn thing." His words settled on me like a warm coat after a cold wind. I nodded, not trusting myself to say much. He patted the fence. "You're not a bad man, Tom. Don't let folks who don't know the whole story act like they do." Then he walked back to his porch, leaving me with more clarity than I'd gotten from anyone else in weeks. It wasn't validation I was craving, it was understanding. And that short exchange with Gerald felt like the first time someone saw the whole picture, not just the jagged pieces scattered across the floor. That night, I sat down at my kitchen table and opened a fresh notebook. I started writing. Nothing fancy, just thoughts, confessions, fragments of moments I hadn't allowed myself to process. I wrote about the day Claire was born, how terrified I'd been to hold her, how small she'd felt in my arms. I wrote about late nights helping her with homework, of her crying over math tests and middle school drama. I wrote about the moment I realized she wasn't mine anymore. Not in a possessive way, but in that quiet, mournful sense that every parent knows when their child begins choosing who they want to become. And I wrote about the wedding, about the invitation, about Kevin. I wrote until my hand cramped and my eyes burned, and still, I didn't feel finished. Because the truth was, even in all my anger, there was still grief. Grief for the relationship I thought we had. Grief for the future I'd imagined, the one where I gave a toast at her wedding, where we danced to a Motown song like we used to in the kitchen when she was 10. I hadn't just lost a daughter. I'd lost a version of myself that I thought was permanent. The dad who could fix things, the dad who was always chosen. Letting go of that illusion was like peeling off a second skin, painful but necessary. I needed to stop mourning a relationship that never truly existed the way I believed it did. She hadn't betrayed me so much as she had revealed who she was when loyalty required discomfort. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't feel the need to. Instead, I sat in the quiet and listened to the hum of the fridge, the occasional creak of the old house settling around me. I thought about all the noise people had been making, family, friends, even strangers. And then I thought about Gerald's words. Sometimes the right thing is the hardest damn thing. He was right. This wasn't about pride. It wasn't about revenge. It was about finally drawing a line in the sand that said, "This is where I stop disappearing for people who claim to love me." It was early spring when the letter came, tucked in among grocery coupons and credit card offers. I almost didn't notice it at first. The envelope was plain, hand-addressed in a rushed, uneven script I didn't recognize right away. But as soon as I opened it and saw the way the ink pooled at the edges of the letters, like it had been written in one sitting, fast and angry and afraid, I knew it was from Claire. She hadn't contacted me in months, not since the voicemail promising I'd never hear from her again. Part of me thought she meant it. Another part, one I'd buried beneath pride and survival, had waited quietly, like a dog lying in front of a locked door. Not because I needed her, but because I'd loved her once so fiercely it left a permanent imprint on everything that came after. The letter wasn't long. It was just over a page, written in blue ink, with a small coffee stain on the corner. She didn't apologize, at least not in the way people expect. There was no, "I'm sorry for what I did." No clean admission of guilt. But there was something raw in the way she wrote. "I didn't realize how far I'd pushed you until you stopped coming back. I thought I was choosing peace, but I was just choosing convenience." That sentence sat heavy in my chest. I read it 3 times. Maybe it wasn't an apology in the traditional sense, but it was the first time she acknowledged the cost of her decisions. Not just to me, but to herself. She didn't ask for money, didn't ask for a second chance. She didn't even ask for a reply. She just said, I wanted you to know I still think about you. I still remember how safe it felt being your daughter. I didn't know what to do with that. I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer where I kept the old Father's Day cards, the drawings from elementary school, the birthday note she'd written when she was 13. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just sat there, letting the words hang in the air like smoke. Maybe that was the closest thing I'd ever get to reconciliation. And maybe that was okay. The truth is, I didn't need her to grovel. I didn't need her to come crawling back and say she was wrong. I just needed her to see. To understand that loving someone doesn't give you permission to wound them and then call it maturity when you ask them to stay silent. A few weeks later, I ran into a woman named Eliza at the hardware store. She was an old friend of Denise's, someone I'd known in passing for years, but had never spoken to much. We got to talking while waiting in line for mulch, of all things. She asked how I'd been, and I gave her the usual polite response. Can't complain, taking things one day at a time. Then she tilted her head and said, "You know, I heard what happened with Claire. People like to talk, but I think what you did took real strength. My father never stood up for himself. Died bitter and quiet. I think about that a lot." I didn't say anything right away, just nodded slowly. Because it hit me, suddenly, that this was the real aftermath, not the silence, not the judgment from people who never knew the whole story. But the quiet moments when strangers recognize something true in your actions. The moments when someone says, without prompting, you did the right thing, even when it hurt. That conversation stayed with me for days. Not because I needed validation, but because it reminded me that integrity often comes with solitude. Not everyone will clap for your boundaries. Not everyone will understand why you walked away. But the ones who do, the ones who see the cost and still say, "Good for you." Those are the voices worth listening to. For the first time in a long while, I felt proud. Not for being strong, but for being honest. For choosing peace over performance. For refusing to play the role of the martyr when all it ever earned me was more pain. On Father's Day, I didn't expect anything. I made myself breakfast, walked Max around the block, and spent most of the afternoon in the garage organizing tools I rarely used. Around 3 p.m., there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find a small package sitting on the mat. No card, no note, just a box wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. Inside was a photo frame, a picture of me and Claire from years ago, at her middle school graduation, her arms around my neck, both of us laughing. There was a post-it on the back. "I found this while cleaning out boxes. Thought you should have it." See, that was all. Nothing dramatic, nothing elaborate, just a gesture, a quiet one. But it was enough. I placed the photo on the mantel, next to a small clock and a ceramic dog Claire had made in second grade. I stood there for a long time, hands in my pockets, staring at the past frozen in that frame. I didn't call her. I didn't write back. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood that closure doesn't always come in conversations or apologies. Sometimes it comes in the simple act of holding your ground, of standing in your truth without begging to be understood. I could love her from a distance. I could hope she healed, without sacrificing myself to make it happen. People talk a lot about forgiveness like it's a single moment, a choice you make once and then move on. But for me, it was something quieter, a process, a slow softening, not letting go of the past, but no longer letting it rule every thought. I didn't hate Claire. I didn't wish her harm. I just finally accepted that she may never fully understand what she took from me. And I didn't need her to. I was no longer the man begging for a seat at someone else's table. I had built my own, and the chair across from me, it would stay empty until someone worthy chose to sit in it. Have you ever drawn a line that cost you someone you loved, but protected your peace? Share your story in the comments. Let's talk about what it really means to hold boundaries, especially with family. If this story resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life dramas that dig deep into betrayal, healing, and hard-earned self-respect. See you soon in the next story.